Welcome one and all. Welcome to the Reset Show, episode number 7. The title of this week's show is The Future of Learning. Some brief introductions before we get our hands properly on our guests. We're joined, of course, by Katie and Emma from People Lab and Belinda from Fathom XP. I'm Justin from Everyday Resilience. And today, for those of you that are old enough to remember actual vinyl records that you put on a record player, we have what we're referring to as a double A side. I don't know if you remember when you used to have singles released, sometimes there'd be a double A side, which meant that there was no B side. Both songs were as good as each other. Our double A sides today is Ella Richardson and Bonnie Cheuk. Ella is a learning design director and Bonnie is a senior business and digital transformation leader, amongst many other things, of course. But those are the straplines that we've chosen to go with today. I am going to hand over, as is our wont, pass the baton to Emma to tell you a bit about the show, for those of you that are new to the show. Then we'll move on to Belinda, who will start the conversation proper. So over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Justin. I'm delighted that you could all join us today. I'm really excited about today's episode. About the future of learning, which is something that's close to all of our hearts. As you know by now, the score with this is really the Reset Show is about kind of getting like-minded people and brilliant guests and experts together to really figure out how we can make the most of this opportunity that we're faced with. The challenges of the pandemic also give us some opportunities to kind of really reset the way we do things and figure out how we can kind of make some changes for the best to help people thrive at work. And that's what we've been kind of talking about on each show and kind of generating some real themes coming out now, I think, which we'll go into a bit later on. Really excited about the session today, and B will go into a little bit more detail in a sec, but it was quite interesting, a piece of research that came out just last week, I think, from the folks at Peakon looking at employee engagement. And interestingly, we've seen during the kind of the pandemic crisis lockdown period that engagement's gone up, which I suppose is probably isn't that much of a surprise because more people have been working at home, more people have had flexibility. Lots of companies have, I've been pleasantly surprised by the amount of companies who have kind of really raised their game when it comes to well-being. But interestingly, the one area called the Peakon research that's dipped slightly is around growth, around the opportunity to have personal growth at work. So just be great to dig into that a little bit later on, because I think that's a really interesting finding of how we kind of ensure we still have opportunities to grow, learn and develop at work, you know, through these kind of crazy, weird, changing times. So that was a really interesting finding for me. I'm going to hand over to B now to introduce our guests and to start to ask some questions. I'm sure we'll have lots of questions, but over to you, B, now.
Yeah, just so lovely to bring Bonnie and Ella together. Bonnie I've known Bonnie, we were just discussing for about 10 years when we started talking about digital transformation and really looking at this whole, we used to have lots of coffees and explore enterprise social and sort of collaborative technologies in the workplace and knowledge management. And I've been, Emma and I, delighted that Bonnie's actually contributed a piece looking at the future of learning to our new book on EX design, which is just touches on so many fascinating topics and discussions. We wanted to sort of explore that conversation a little bit more today. And Ella, I've had the pleasure of getting to know a little bit over the summer, and we've been doing some really interesting work together. So as with Ella and Emma on the call, we have 2 psychologists, and Bonnie is also a doctor as well. So we are in such good company for exploring this work. And Ella and Bonnie both have such fascinating backgrounds. I don't want to do the whole introductions to you because I'm going to pick out the bits that make most sense to me, but actually I'm going to do something we don't usually do. I'm going to hand over to the 2 of you to give us a little bit of background about yourselves and what's brought you to where you are now in terms of the world of learning. Bonnie, do you want to start, just because I'm looking at you first?
Great. I mean, first of all, I'm very delighted to be here. So thanks for having me. And I'm on a learning journey myself, I have to say. And so I'm sharing a lot of half-baked ideas today on this call, and feel free to really challenge, build on, and we learn together. So who am I? I'm very passionate about actually human beings and human sense making. And when you talk about engagement goes up and all this, I mean, during this COVID times, I think that's the right moment. So I'm really interested in human beings, how they make sense of the world, what are their needs, in order to design services and systems that really fit their hands. So, and part of this, it's about human sense making, it's actually learning, right? How do we help people to make sense of the world? And so I've been in the, working in, I have to say, throughout my career, it's always been about working in highly complex matrix organization, global organization, trying to figure out how to make digital transformation happen. And typically when you want to so-called transform the way people do things digitally, it also means it's transforming the way, not just using the tools, but also how people work and the mindset and the behavior. So one way or another, I've been given all sorts of interesting titles from business and digital transformation leader, sometimes change management, sometimes culture change, sometimes knowledge management, knowledge sharing, collaboration. And I figure out it doesn't really matter. Maybe they're all in one same bucket anyway. Just very recently this year, I have actually started to focus on an area called building global capability for learning agility and learning culture. So I'm currently within a large pharmaceutical company, and whatever I'm saying, I'm not speaking on behalf of the business, but more my own really learning and reflection. But anyway, I've been given the task to figure out what do we mean by define learning agility? What does that actually mean? Figure out how do we actually enable, empower our colleagues to continuously learn on the job? And then how do you do that for 75,000 people? So that's my little bit about me. Nice to meet all of you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Just lovely. Just as you say, so fascinating and touches on and delves into so many really interesting and relevant areas. So thank you so much. Can't wait to start. Ella, you are nodding loads. Tell us a bit about yourself, and then tell us why you're nodding so enthusiastically.
It's like listening to a mirror. You know, I know that Bonnie's got a really interesting background, but I know we have a lot of interests that cross over, but probably come from very different perspectives, which will be really interesting. So I'm Leo's learning design director at an organisation called Leo Learning, and there I look after a team of critical thinkers in learning. And Leo is this amazing collection of talented people who deliver and think about learning strategies and transformation for a huge variety of businesses. So we get to see across the board, and I think a really privileged to be able to do that. So we analyse, you know, how organisations work and grow and evolve. And I think really at its core, you know, I and the organisation are about helping people to connect and to share and fundamentally to learn in today's world. And that's, you know, how do we captivate and excite them to really engage in meaningful learning? And I guess the twist, if there is one, is that the expertise that is in the use of technology. So emerging technologies are, you know, look at us all on Zoom now, you know, they're affording us incredible powers. And so everything that we do is about ensuring that we're harnessing technology to serve behavioural and cultural change in organisations. You know, I'm like this massive magpie for new technology, and it's funny because I almost never anticipated working with it so much. You know, I think just thinking about what you were saying, Bonnie, you know, I studied psychology, I loved philosophy and linguistics, and was always really interested in how children learn through play. And, you know, I fell into the world of adult learning, and actually it taps into all my interests about the human condition and technology and change. And so I think the exciting thing is we've got eternal problems that we're finding new ways to answer. And we're also answering, you know, especially in this period, like we're answering new questions. And I guess this is the power of it. You know, this is the future of learning. It gives us all that.
I'm loving this. I'm now nodding. I'm now nodding after Ella has shared her intro. Really, I think there's a lot of share really experience and really, you know, the love for some of the common topics, digital, people. One thing I want to build on is that's something about talk about latest technologies, right? AI, right? It's such a buzz topic, right? AI, data-driven approach, and I think that's something linked to learning as well. If you think about, people talk about machine learning, right? And then we talk about human learning. When we talk about future of learning, how would these AI-driven machines and human beings actually learn together? What would that look like? I think we're at the early stage of even exploring this kind of concepts, right? And that really blend human beings and human together.
Fascinating. Thank you. So such rich thinking. I love it. So you sort of talked about how you've got to here and what you're interested in and what what you're working at the moment. I'm interested to hear what you both think are the biggest trends, or rather what you're seeing are the biggest trends right now, because I guess there's a difference between what should be happening and then actually what you are seeing that actually is happening within organizations when it comes to how they're approaching learning. Ella, I'm going to come to you first.
It's funny, just thinking AI is one of those things where so I'm generally not like a massive fan of trends in learning, because I think it can lead to the misapplication of technology. And I think AI is one of those things. I mean, that's probably a whole session in itself. But I think there's common needs that I've seen at the moment, and that's things like the need for human connection and sensitivity, a need to meet people where they are and really not be generalists. And I think probably flexibility in approach. I think someone said something earlier, and it's that, there's a very little variety at the moment, and actually it's an understanding people's needs. But I guess on the organization level, I'm seeing an amplification in requirements, and there's some things that are quite distinct. And in learning, I guess, so the primary thing that we saw early on was a rapid shift of enhancing traditional corporate learning using technology. So obviously that's like high demand for virtual classroom, which comes with a different set of skill sets and behaviors for facilitators and learners, but also things like digital twin approaches. We're seeing more of the atomization of learning, like how do we make it more granular and accessible and searchable and lift it out, and also in reducing waste. I think a lot of organizations have seen an opportunity in the period that we've been through. But sorry, back to the question. So I think another trend is if I can call it that, is reskilling. The needs of businesses right now are changing massively as businesses are having to transform. And I think that we're seeing a greater need in being able to demonstrate the value of serving the business objectives. And often, that I think, if we think about the futurist piece of that, it's about using data to do that as well. I guess I'd also say, I'm not sure if this is really a trend, but I think it's something that probably should be, which I guess is thinking about learning in the context of like cultural and a technological transformation. What I mean by that is, I think I'm seeing a shift at the moment in organizations as they're recognizing a need to change a learning culture, as well as sometimes technology to enable the learning, the communication and change. And I'm kind of seeing that at the moment. Is it, like you were saying, Bonnie, I think my thoughts are kind of emerging at the moment, but I'm seeing it as manifesting as requirements for platforms and technology, but actually what organizations are needing is more of a strategic analysis of the requirements to deliver on a learning culture, and then we can look for efficiencies. Is that something you're seeing, you're feeling in where you are?
I'm nodding here. Shall I let me build on what Ella has been sharing. So for me, again, I have to emphasize that I'm wired working in large, complex, multinational companies. So that's my experience. So it's like, I have to say, it's a partial view, right, of what the trends are, but happy to share that. I see one overall biggest trend is that organizations now see the importance of continuous learning in the flow of work. And this is not just about airy-fairy, nice to have, nice things to do, right? We all love learning, but this is about increasing performance, innovating, making sure that the workforce is future ready and really and creating new value for the customers. So I see that's a overarching biggest trend. And then within this, I see maybe through the eyes of three personas, how do they see the learning is changing. So number one is, I would say from the C-suite, the executive level, they are truly waking up to investing in learning, and that is because they actually recognize that things are changing so fast. Everything it's in flux, and the only way to stay competitive, it's really to continue to, for the organization to be able to continue to adapt and adjust and learn and innovate, right? So it's great that the C-suite, they may not call it learning though, you know, some if you do a search on the internet, you see some people call it learning agility, able to learn in an agile way. Others even call it, with dropping the learning word, they call it business agility, right? It's just how we can be a responsive, we can be an adaptive organization. So that's fascinating for me. So the first persona. Second persona is, and this is also a hat I wear as well, as digital transformation leaders, right? There are so many, look around, all the companies are going through some kind of digital transformation, although they all mean different things. Anyway, but if you talk to the digital transformation leaders, and also people maybe program managing some of this digital initiative, you'll hear again, they are saying that we definitely need to enable my team to collaborate well, to learn, and to really learn and collaborate well together. And what do they mean? Sometimes they talk about that means being agile, being adaptive. They may be specifically talking about some of the agile practices like running retrospective or after action review, and continuously reflect so that you can work even better as a team. So that's another group here which actually truly believe that that is a need to learn. And I hear very often these leaders actually say either to myself or the team and saying that we really need to get these people to learn. They need to adapt fast. They need to, you know, change the way they have been working. They need to change fast. So that's almost an expectation there. It has to happen, right? Almost from the top, right? That's the demand there. And then the third persona group is the L&D leaders. I think Ella, you touched on that. They are also moving into a new space in terms of making learning materials, training courses online, trying to figure out what does that mean in this new virtual world. You know, some of the leadership training or leadership development program, which used to be done face-to-face in a classroom setting. How do I actually, you know, transfer that experience and do it really, really well online? And also some of the even more progressive L&D leaders are thinking about how do we actually go beyond just learning and training, learning as training, and can learning go beyond training? And if so, what does that truly mean when we say learning in the flow of work? What can we do about it? Right? So I see these three trends, but all of them, when you add up, is like, yes, there is renewed interest and commitment to learning in an organization context, which is great.
It's funny, isn't it? I often think like in times of recession, what you often see is learning is like the hot potato that gets dropped first because it's a nice to have. But this has been really different. Like it feels different. I think, you know, and I don't know, maybe it's the technology where we're at, but it feels certainly like a bit of a technological revolution in that, you know, we are now set up to be able to communicate. Like this wouldn't have been possible any number of years ago, and so actually we would have been in a very different place. And so now that I think it's the coming together of, you know, learning and serviced by the technology that is actually changing the perspective on how learning can serve organizations. And I think to your point, Bonnie, there's a real opportunity there for organizations to harness.
I think so. And I think that's an opportunity to push beyond as well, because on one hand, we can do everything we've been doing offline and just move it on Zoom and do it online like for like. But I don't think that is, I mean, that's the minimum foundation. And I see a lot of L&D colleagues are trying to do that. And I see that as short-term tactics, which is good, right? At least you're making the move. You're willing to unlearn and try something different. to push the boundary, I wonder whether there is more that can be done to almost like create new kind of experience, which perhaps we may not even be able to do in the past, right? So truly leverage technology, but use that to rethink how could we really get to inject that human touch, even in a virtual environment. So I was just conducting a workshop yesterday talking about how do we be remotely human, recognizing we are remote, right? And also the other thing is it is physical distancing. It's not social. It's not actually social distancing. People, we are social animals, no matter whether we meet face to face or online. So it's like, how do we keep that human touch while we are doing things, while we are empowering people to learn online? So I think a lot to think about. Don't have all the answers.
And that's the foundation, I think, actually, of some of the work that Bea and I have been looking at together. I keep getting kind of variations on the form of a question that is something like, how do we achieve the richness of face-to-face using technology? And my answer is kind of, we're asking the wrong question. We're never going to be able to do that, but we can help people to connect in new ways and actually achieve something rich, but in a different way.
Just for an example, right? So somebody asked me, how do I create the serendipity access to colleagues when I bump into people, at the corridor so what we did was something very simple. So we used the Zoom, like what we're doing now, and we have breakout rooms, right? And then, but you don't have free flow. We have a 5-minute breakout session where you mix and match people and let them talk about a topic, right? And then within that 5 minutes, people actually come back and I ask them, how do you feel after 5 minutes? I say, oh, that is really like, you create the opportunity, those serendipity moments, and people still can connect and mix and talk about things that they have not planned to talk about, but it needs to be put into the design. It won't happen.
Thought about.
Yeah, it has to be designed.
Yeah. Actually, we were talking about this as a team the other day, and we said it used to be ice creams and coffee. Those were the catalysts for serendipitous moments, casual conversations, and now we need to create ice creams and coffee.
Yeah, virtual ice cream and coffee, right? In a new way.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the research that they did in Pixar in the studios, that they realized in the design of the layout the importance of these serendipitous moments. And so you're nodding, Ella, as well. So the whole design and layout of their studios it forces people constantly, I mean, not now obviously at the moment, but when they're in the same building, constantly to have those meeting points, because they recognized as a business that is where generally all of the magic happens, is in those half conversations, accidental serendipitous opportunities. And that is a real challenge. How do you still enable that to happen when people are physically?
I can give you an example. I think it can be orchestrated. So what I have been experimenting with in my organization is that we create something called learning out loud circles. And what does that mean? It's actually about bringing people, 4 to 5 people together. They do not know one another. They are from different business areas. So one person can be from operations, one from sales, one from R&D. And they are grouped together. Think about it's kind of a Tinder-like. So people register and say, hey, I want to join Learning Out Loud Circle. It's like, yes, okay, good. We match you. And then we just then send them an invite. We say, congratulations, 4 or 5 of you. Now you're in a group. In the next 4 weeks, every week for 1 hour, you're going to pick a topic that 4 or 5 of you have a shared common goal. Whatever it is, you decide. It's self-directed learning, right? Learning in the flow of work. And then every week they meet for 1 hour. And after 4 weeks, you can decide. We don't want to make it a drag and a chore that people feel they have to commit to forever. But as a taster, these people actually manage, and they come back and tell us the feedback is like, yes, we have orchestrated some serendipity access. They say it's even better than in the normal face-to-face world, because even in that world, they've never had the opportunity to work across so far away, right, with people from another set area. So kind of an innovation as we try out new things, and people end up connecting and collaborating and working on some build on new innovative ideas. So that's a very specific example that we have been experimenting.
To riff off that, because I love that, Bonnie. And actually, Justin, what you were saying about kind of building design, you know, I've always been interested in architecture and how the things around us influence the way we think, feel, and behave. And it's just something, you know, we're again at this kind of vanguard moment where I think, you know, how we live and work is so being influenced by the places around us. And you know, whilst I think a lot about technology, it's also about, you know, we kind of have like, we still have this kind of battery farm approach to offices, or we have, you know, in many offices that I think have started to shift over time. But this is probably going to give us a really good kick up the butt, if I can say it like that, and thinking about what's really needed in organizations to actually deliver on their objectives, both from the, you know, from the behavioral, psychological, but also the physical. And actually, how does that, you know, how do people's physical, we tend to think of learning as and performance is entirely psychological and like independent in a way, but actually is the environment servicing that, is something that I think is really interesting, and again is something that we're just at this moment where we need to start reconsidering what that means for us.
Yeah, I mean, and to add to that, I think, I mean, loving the conversation and so many thoughts coming into my head. I'm just trying to kind of articulate them in a clear way, which probably won't happen. But anyway, just thinking about the experience of working in this new way for those of us who are working in this new way, and there are lots of people that aren't, of course. You know, I know from our point of view, we've been very pleasantly surprised actually at how well it has worked. I think I think before the crisis, you know, online learning to some extent was seen as the poor relation to face-to-face. And me being an extrovert, I'm like, you know, I want to get in a room with people. And what we've seen is that it's kind of given a voice to those people that didn't really, no matter how good you are at facilitating, right? You get in a room full of, you know, people, they'll be extroverts. It's easy to hide if you're more of an introvert or, you know, omnivore, whatever. And what we've seen is that social connection piece, we've been blown away by that. You know, we've had people, I won't name any names, but I've had people that I've been working with who said that they had no idea that someone in their team had kids. And you think, well, how could you not have known that? But they didn't. That was their reality. And it's kind of enabled us to get, I think in many ways, get much closer. I you know, I'm wearing a woolly jumper today. Normally in corporate world, I put on my, not suit, but I smart. And I wouldn't kind of be being 50 as I was last week. You know, I had a very kind of clear definition between work Emma and home Emma. And I like that. And I'm kind of getting much more comfortable with being a bit more authentic. And I tell the story about when my 12-year-old kind of appeared when I was doing a 50-person webinar at Starbucks, and it was okay and no one minded. And that sort of acceptance of, you know, we are human beings, going back to the human connection piece, I think is a really it's a real kind of sort of pleasant surprise that we need to keep hold of as we move through this, that we are kind of getting a little bit more real and human and honest. And I know if you go into kind of, you know, the millennials and Gen Z, they go, well, I've always been myself at work. But I think for a lot of us, we have kind of put on a bit of a work persona, and with that, the walls are coming down and the lines being blurred, which I think is really, really exciting. And going back to kind of the whole, you know, talk about kind of learning, you know, on the job in the moment, I think something that I'd really like to pick up with you both is that sort of that psychological safety piece, that personal mindset piece around, you know, we all do lots of kind of formal learning, informal learning, action learning, sex coaching, all different types of learning that we do at work. But ultimately, you always get those people who are like, I don't feel psychologically safe enough to admit that I don't know stuff. Therefore, I'm going to fold my arms and say, well, I've done this before, I don't need this. And in many ways, when we are involved in any kind of learning intervention, you know, you're pushing on an open door with those people like all of us that go, I want to learn, I'm curious, tell me more. Versus those people who are like, you know, and I think from my experience going through the last few months, it's almost given people permission to go, this is completely, sorry, I'm going to say unprecedented. None of us know what we're doing. It's okay not to know. And I've noticed that people are going, at last I can breathe a sigh of relief and I can put my hand up and go, I need some help. And that's one of the kind of the benefits that I've seen. I just wondered if you had a view on that at all.
I'm just thinking through all the things that colleagues are experiencing throughout this period. Yeah, suddenly it's almost like work has changed as well. It's not just the tools, it's like how we define work has actually changed. I think it forced us, and I don't mean just us here, but the leaders, people at all different levels, to be more human at work. And it's not just about kids jumping, up and down in the, at the teleconference, but it's also about truly knowing that things are so uncertain and so much in flux. You have a lot more empathy, a lot more, hopefully, humility as well, and more caring for one another. So I think that is the biggest change. Is about changing, almost like changing in the nature of work. And I think that has huge implication on what does that mean by learning or empowering people to learn in this new world. And my thinking is, like, emerging thinking is, in the past, we assume work is very stable, it's very organized. Work is about knowing what needs to happen, minimize risk, getting things done correctly. And if we take this world view, then learning, it's all about helping you to be correct, to do things better, more efficiently. And then this world is now turned upside down. To Emma, your point is, but when we don't know the answer, how do you empower people to learn? Do I still teach you assuming that I'm the expert and I know it all? Even if I'm the manager, do I know exactly how I should take care of myself or my team? He or she is probably still figuring that out. So in this kind of new world, I think there's an opportunity to reset and rethink what should L&D, functions or HR be thinking about. If you're in or anyone in the learning space, what should you be thinking about? How do you actually empower people to learn in an uncertain world? And I think it requires totally different type of work practices, and that include self-reflection, self-awareness, time to pause and look around and reach out to a diverse group of people with diversity of viewpoints, and being able to collaborate and make sense of things together, being able to, I think somebody talked about, being able to show your vulnerability, that I actually do not know, and can we debate and discuss, knowing that we can collectively find the answers. I think these are all the practices which maybe traditionally learning experience is not designed in that way. Learning experience, somehow, I think we have a paradox here. We have been trained to empower people by telling people what's the right thing to do. And now I'm actually designing and experimenting some of my learning experience program. And this is about actually the first thing I put in front of people, and I say, disrupt it. Tell me what is not right for you. And when I share with some of my L&D friends, they say, you sure you want to do that? You don't want to design your whole curated program and you tell people that, challenge it. Haven't you thought about it? I say, yeah, I thought about it as much as I have, but I would like to put it there. And does it make sense to you? Tell me what you disagree with. Does it resonate? Can it be better? Right? Can you challenge me? So I'm quite enjoying that part, but I know it's a little bit disruptive.
Ella.
I'd add to that, I think the interesting thing about the concept of psychological safety is it's like, with the blend of work and home for many people, not everyone, but for a lot of people, that is something that it's hard to distinguish. And like you're saying, Bonnie, there are some, a lot of people in organizations are really struggling right now, and it's a lot of people don't have it easy, and it can be quite hard to separate the two. And I've been thinking about this as it's fundamentally altered the importance of and the actual concepts of things like work, but also home. My home has also become my jail cell, a really lovely jail cell, but it's a jail cell, of family, and how you relate, and even of safety. Like, what does it mean to be safe? We've had to kind of relearn all of these social behaviors, and continuously do, as pubs shut and restrictions change. What we've done, I think, has been propelled forward, in probably 5 to 10 years in terms of changes. And actually, like, to your point, I mean, it's thinking, it's making sure that we are thinking about and supporting people through that, because, you know, whilst there, on the one hand, we've talked about lots of the opportunities, you know, and there are benefits for individuals, there's benefits to the environment, you know, a lot of that stuff shifting, it's also very difficult still for a lot of people. And actually, you know, again, it's that physical digital piece. You know, I like you, I love what's changed. I almost think it's a lack of professionalism in the best kind of way, you know, that humanity. Everyone's almost become more intensely human. You know, we're in our own spaces, we're not dressed up in our power suits, sat in a church-like atrium, you know, and, you know, walking up to a boardroom. But actually, you know, it's the human connections in that, and building those, and reminding everyone to think about those, and thinking, you know, person first, that we can actually enhance that connectedness, and I think improve, you know, create a better future, really, because it will mean that access to learning can and should be democratic, diversity can flourish, you know, and people's resilience can evolve and grow. You know, I know you have lots of thoughts about knowledge, Bonnie, and I think part of this is it's about learning being less about knowledge and skills, but about capability, and growing, you know, that resilience in people as part of organizations.
I love that. And I like your word about remind as well, because I think that's something we take it for granted, and we're now resetting the protocol. When you say remind, I mean reminding as a leader or someone, a subject matter expert, you actually remind people in these kind of virtual calls that they can speak up, they can be yourself. And we actually remind people, our colleagues, that if you have whatever circumstances you're facing that day, if you're at the beginning of the call, say so, right? So you may have a challenge, or you may have issue, or you may have kids running around, or you may feel you have got up at 6 a.m. for another teleconference and you're still in your pajama, and you don't want to, you know, have your video on. We are constantly reminding ourselves and one another to take care of one another. It's like giving people the permission to be themselves. And I think those are little things, right? Little cues, but it does require particular people in power to repeatedly say so. Otherwise, you're still a little bit worried, right? Talking about psychological safety. It's like, is that right? Am I right to say I'm not good enough today? Right? You can, yeah. So there are things that we can actually help colleagues to practice. I call these micro moment work practices, little things that people can do, can drop into anything that they're doing when they are connecting and collaborating with colleagues.
Bonnie and Ella, thank you so much. I've just looked at the clock, and it tells me it's, I can't believe the time is going so quickly. We had a question earlier from Laura, which we haven't had a chance to ask yet. I'd like to share it with you. I'll read it out. What do they mean by the richness? I think this was you, Ella, when you were talking about people, the richness of the live experience. And Laura's wondering if we could drill down into this a little bit when you speak with managers, because they're often limited in their thoughts, and it's our role to guide their thinking into new ways. What comments have, let's start with you, Ella, first, and then move on to Bonnie before we have to sadly wrap up.
Yeah, so when we say the richness, I mean, I think it's kind of some of the things that we've been talking about. I think where that question comes from is how do we recreate the humanity in the experiences that we had? And actually, you know, one of the tensions that we've always seen in learning between, you know, face-to-face learning, like in workshops, was seen as the opposite to digital, which I always found completely strange, anathema. But you know, that it's kind of almost amplified that, and you know, and we're seeing them as opposing, when I think what we're saying is actually how do you build human connection through connectedness and using technology in new ways. The richness of a learning experience comes from, you know, getting support, being motivated, working with others. And I think that color and the context is really, really important. And that's the kind of thing that I think is what I'm tending to see that people are meaning when they're asking about and looking to create richness. It's about understanding where people are, what they need to do, and the support that they need at that moment to enable that, rather than having, you know, a one size fits all, which typically in a person to person, I call it in person now because we're in person, right?
Yeah.
We're not physically in person, but we're in person. You have that ability to flex and adapt, that typically I think organizations perceived that you didn't have as much flexibility with traditional kind of digital learning methods. So I think that's a big part of it as well.
Lovely, thank you. What about you, Bonnie?
I'll add to that from this is drawing on my experience and how I've been applying Dervin's sense-making methodology to think about how we can actually create that kind of humanness, whether you're designing learning experience or actually any solution. I think that's one thing about you actually need to be equal. Because sometimes when we say, you know, okay, let's inject some more humanness, but are you equal, right? Do you think I am better than this person, and therefore I'm going to change you, I'm going to transform you, I'm going to make you better? I think if we start with actually, I always remind myself, it's like if I lower my ego and treat one another as equal, living, breathing human beings. And that would mean that, to Ella's point, that would mean you truly understand the need of the person. What are the joys, pains, dreams of that person? What are the obligations? What does the person really need to do? What are the challenges? And you then have truly open dialogue to look at what is helping you, what's not helping you. How might I actually help you to build a bridge to make it better? And I think when you come out from the conversation, both sides actually learn something and has been transformed. And I see, for me, that is the richness in terms of bringing that humanness. And I challenge myself and other learning professionals, do we actually consider ourselves as equal? Do we actually open up that space to allow that equal dialogue to happen, and therefore truly serving the needs? And like what I said earlier, when you come out from that learning experience, have I changed as well as a learning person, or am I there to download and spoon feed and push things down your throat, or whatever you call it?
Yeah. Summarize it as meaning making.
Yeah, sense making. And that's why I say it's a sense making methodology, which I've been practicing for the past 20 plus years. And it's a never ending journey, because you can apply in any context, as long as treat one another as human beings. But sometimes we pay lip service. We say, yes, we treat one another as human beings, but how? And then you look at all the practices that you actually do. You actually position yourself as higher, you're better than others, you tell people what to do, and then you say, oh, I'm treating people as human beings.
Bonnie and Ella, what a rich conversation. I have to be the bad guy and drag it to a close. But what a lovely, lovely place to finish on being human and treating others with humanity and respect. And I love the challenge as well. I'm sure all of us are in sort of questioning ourselves on that as well, as accountability, self-accountability conversation booked in following this call. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to our AA side guests. Thank you to my fellow hosts. Thank you to our guests who've joined us for this live recording. If you're watching this on YouTube, please, next time, why not sign up and join the call? You might actually get to put a question to the special guests. Next week, episode 7, we have Jeff MacDonald, a keynote speaker, consultant, mental health campaigner, and he'll be talking about what it means when organizations truly make well-being a strategy. So to carry on our theme from today, when they actually walk it like they talk it, they really put this theory into practice and hold themselves to account on that. So without further ado, thank you from the four of us to all of you. Go well. We look forward to carrying on this conversation at some point in the future. Thanks, folks. Take care. Bye for now.